Please allow me to introduce our presenter, Rand Walker. Rand Walker is the author of 21 books. His short stories, flash fiction, microfiction, and poetry have appeared in a variety of anthologies and journals. Prior to becoming a writer and educator, he worked in magazine publishing and practiced law in Mississippi. Rand is the winner of the Indie Author Project's 2019 National Indie Author of the Year Award, the 2019 Black Caucus of the American Library Association Best Fiction Ebook Award, and the 2018 Virginia Indie Author Project Award for Adult Fiction. Rand is a graduate of Morehouse College with a bachelor's in English, Pace University with a master's in publishing, and George Washington University Law School. He also has a certificate in publishing from New York University and has done graduate work in English at Mississippi State University. Rand is an assistant professor of English and creative writing at Hampton University. He lives in Virginia with his wife and much better half, Lauren, and his amazing little rock star daughter, Zoe. Welcome and thank you, Rand.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Renee. How is everybody doing? I know that I can't hear you, but I can feel the vibe. So I hope that you're all doing well and that you're staying safe out there. I'd like to share a little bit about my journey as a writer. And at the end, we can open it to a Q&A and see if you have any questions. I was originally a lawyer. Okay, I worked in publishing, then I went to law school and became a lawyer. I was a lawyer in a small town called West Point, Mississippi. And as I was practicing law, I realized that it just wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy it. Um, it was stressful. I was not happy, and I knew that I needed to do something else. So I gave myself 2 years just to make sure that I did not have any interest in the area. And then I promptly resigned from being an attorney, which is a strange thing to do when you don't have something lined up. So I quit and didn't have a job lined up. I would never tell anybody to quit a job if you didn't already have something else lined up. But that's exactly what I did. And I had to figure out what makes me happy. What am I passionate about? What do I really want to do? And I knew I loved writing and I loved reading. And I've been wrestling with writing a book for some time up to that point. I'll write 10 pages and then stop and then write another 10 pages and stop. And finally, one morning I woke up and it kind of clicked in my head. And I sat down and started writing what will become my first book. And when I got about 60 pages in, I reached out to a friend of mine who was a literary agent. And I told her, I have this manuscript, can you read it? I wanted to know if it was any good, if it was just me thinking it was good or whether or not, a professional thought it was good. And she liked it and told me she would represent me on the book and for me to go ahead and finish it. So I finished it and we went through the whole process of where the agent sends it out to different editors and it got rejected. But then we would get those rejections that were saying things like, we like the book, but we think that the extramarital affair needs to be drawn out more in the story. Or we love the book, but we're afraid that an African American women population wouldn't want to read a book from the voice of a Black man. I'm like, okay. At one point, I actually had an associate editor who loved the book, wanted to move forward, but his senior editor got fired, and the entire editorial arm got fired along with her. So I was always so close and then going back to zero. And all while this was going on, I started hearing about, the Amazon Kindle and about how authors were starting to upload their books to the Kindle and they were having success there. So I thought about doing the same thing. And I wrote a book specifically for that purpose. The name of the book was B-Sides and Remixes. And I told my agent, I'm going to take this book, I'm going to publish it myself on the Kindle and see what happens. The idea was attractive because when you're publishing things yourself, you can control the cover, you can control the layout, you can control the price, which is very key to selling a book. And she told me, don't do that. Don't do that. give me 3 months to see if I can get some interest from a publisher. And I was like, I really want to publish this myself. And she said, no, 3 months. And I said, okay, 3 months. And she took her time, the 3 months, and it came and passed. And I was like, okay, I'm doing what I want to do here. So I published that first book, and it did fairly well. I think I sold about 8,000 copies of the book, which is a pretty good number for any book, really. But for a book that was my first one publishing on my own, and it kind of encouraged me to do more books. So I started publishing different books, and some of those books didn't necessarily perform as well as others. One book in particular had a really slow start domestically, but apparently somebody in France read the book and wanted. He actually wrote to me and said, "I'd like to translate your book into French." And at first, I thought it was one of those things where, I am a Nigerian prince and I have money that's tied up in the account and I need your help to get it out. And I'm like, okay, they're just pulling my leg here. So I went and checked him out, found out he was actually a French translator, and not only a French translator, but a renowned French translator. In fact, he had translated works for Janet Ivanovich and other best-selling authors here in the States. And so I contacted him and said, yeah, it's fine for you to translate it. And he said, can I shop it here in Paris? And I was like, sure. I mean, I'd already written the book. I'd done what I was going to do with the book. And he found a publisher for it. And the next thing I know, I was getting into a contract with a company called Edition Ultramont, which is based out of Paris. And they have since published the book twice. But that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't published it myself. But anyway, getting back to Amazon, everything I'm doing is within the Amazon system. And at a certain point, I started to plateau with the books, and they weren't selling like I thought they would sell. And the algorithms kept changing, and the different strategies for selling books in that particular ecosystem kept evolving. And I just realized that I didn't have the patience to keep up with what was going on. And I got to a point where I pretty much published everything that I had written. And I had one novel left, and it was called Daykeeper. And I decided to take Daykeeper and publish it simply because I was clearing my plate. I was about to be done with Rand Walker, create a pseudonym, start over from scratch, try this again with an agent and all of that, and see what happens. So I published Daykeeper, and it's a very quiet book, selling just like the other books. And um, eventually, I decided maybe I should submit it for some awards. It can't hurt. And I was looking for places to send the book to. And I came across the Virginia Indie Author Project. I'd never even heard of the Virginia Indie Author Project. And I submitted the book only because the contest was free. If I had to pay $5, I would have never submitted it. So I submitted it for free and promptly forgot that I submitted it. And then I found out that the Black Caucus of the American Library Association also had an award for fiction, which was free to enter that as well. So I applied, didn't think anything of it, and that was that. I was told that the results for these competitions would come down like 3, 4 months later. And when I didn't hear back 3 or 4 months later, I assumed that I'd been rejected. I mean, I know what that is. When you are applying for or submitting your work to people and they don't respond, that is a form of rejection. So I had made my peace with it and was moving on to the next thing, preparing this pseudonym to start over from scratch again. And then in December of 2018, I got an email, and the email said, "You won the Virginia Indie Author Project." And I was thinking, there's a Nigerian prince who wants my money. And because now I apply, figure out, okay, yeah, apply that. I won it. I won an award for this book, the book that I just had sitting there the whole time. And I didn't quite grasp it, but then the check came, and I was like, oh, okay, this is for real. A few months later, I was contacted by the Indie Author Project and told that the winners from all the different states were all going to be put into one big pot, and they would select an overall winner, which would be the National Indie Author of the Year award. It was an inaugural award. I'm like, okay, I think I got lucky with the Virginia thing. I'm not really expecting anything else to happen. And it just so happened that a few months later, I got a call saying that you won the National Indie Author Award. And then on top of that, the Black Caucus Award that I applied for earlier, I ended up winning that one too, all off of a book that I had no intentions of ever publishing. But this is where it gets interesting because I'd been inside of Amazon's ecosystem the entire time that I was doing my publishing. The moment I put one toe outside of Amazon, things started to change for me. And that's when I understood that there was a much bigger uh, audience and way of marketing and doing your books than just inside of Amazon. That's when I discovered how important libraries are to the development of writers. So the Indie Author Project put together this chart here, and there's some interesting things you'll see on this chart. Uh, for example, did you realize that 40% of US adults who uh, bought a book that they originally had read at the library? I didn't realize that. In fact, if you were to listen to certain companies, of which I will not name, they make you believe that having your book in the library is taking away sales that you would have from the bookstores and other outlets. But it turns out that more and more people are buying the books that they're actually reading at the library. But here's the kicker though. Check out that 70%. 70% bought another book by the same author as the one that they borrowed from the library. That to me, especially as a person who is a prolific writer, is the thing that stands out the most. And honestly, I couldn't believe that all of this was happening without my knowledge. So I immediately started tapping into what it meant to be a part of an industry that was beyond Amazon. So as I mentioned before, I won the 2019 Indie Author of the Year Award and the 2019 Black Caucus of the American Library Association Fiction Award, and also the 2018 Virginia Author Project Award, which jump-started all of this. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful ride since then. In fact, if you look over here to the side where it says Portable Black Magic, I'm going to come back to that book because when people do things for you, at least for me, I want to give back. And that book is going to factor into one of the ways that I want to show my gratitude to librarians in particular for the success that I've managed to come across in the past few years. One of the great things is I've been able to reach new audiences. In fact, I no longer use Amazon as my primary form of distribution. I prefer to use Ingram Spark. In fact, there's a wonderful team there. I've actually been to their headquarters and met with them. Wonderful, wonderful team. The books that I create through them are far higher quality. The distribution that you get is actually wide distribution. If you're a person who is an author who is self-publishing, you're probably aware that under KDP or the program or platform that Amazon uses, they say they have wide distribution, but real wide distribution is getting into libraries, getting into bookstores. And the way you get into those environments, you have to have a company that will allow you to discount your books and also make your books returnable. And Amazon doesn't do that. In fact, a lot of independent bookstores don't really like to buy books from Amazon because they see Amazon as a direct threat, a direct competitor to what they do and to their existence. So being with Ingram Spark has allowed me to get into the hands of people that I'd never been able to connect with before, and also to get the access to libraries. And in addition to that, I've been also able to connect with other indie authors who are taking this more professional approach to their work. You see the artwork there. I met this guy, Bob Eckstein. He is a cartoonist from The New Yorker. I used to actually intern at The New Yorker when I moved to New York. Uh, I didn't know him back then, but it's kind of funny. This doing all these things, they brought us in contact with each other, and he wanted to do a little cartoon of me. And I thought it was really great that somebody who was an artist for a place that I once interned for thought enough of me to do a cartoon. Um, and it's just been a lot of little things like that that have been wonderful. I did a book signing at the American Library Association annual conference where we had the longest line at our booth. And we actually, I think I signed about 100 books that day. It's a great time. And a lot of librarians got a chance to become acquainted with my work. And it's been exciting. I have to tell you this. One of the, actually three librarians from the Library of Congress came by to get their book signed and said, we have been anticipating this event, all weekend, and we're finally glad that it's happening. I'm like, you know who I am? The Library of Congress. I'm like, whoa. I mean, so it's been really cool and humbling on a lot of levels. And none of this would have happened if I hadn't like looked outside of Amazon to see if there were other opportunities available. you know, Publishing a book, you never know if you're going to connect with anybody, if anybody's going to understand what you're talking about or even care what you're talking about. In fact, like this quote says, it's like you're dropping a stone into a well and you're waiting to hear if it makes a sound. And up to that point, I didn't really feel that I was making a sound. But when Daykeeper began to win these awards, the sound was just overwhelming. And so a number of different opportunities have come up uh, since I've been involved with libraries. In fact, I was invited to participate in the Library Journal Day of Dialogue, which last, I think in 2019, this took place in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And what's funny, if you look at the picture at the top there, I'm the only one up there who's self-published. Everybody else is from Random House, Penguin, Simon and Schuster, some major publisher. In fact, some of you might even notice the woman on the far end there. She wrote American Dirt, which was the Oprah Book Club pick, and also a lightning rod for a lot of criticism that I'm not going to get into at this point. But it was wonderful being able to share the stage with them. And one thing you can't really tell from the picture is I was able to introduce portable black magic. And why that's important is because I decided to make the ebook version of portable black magic exclusive only to librarians. So you could only get the book from the library. You couldn't get it from Amazon Kindle. You couldn't get it from Barnes Noble Nook, Google Play, Kobo, none of the other stuff. You had to go through a library to check out the book. And I had it exclusive with the libraries for about a year before it eventually rolled back into the other outlets. I also had Daykeeper selected as the director's book club choice for the Broward County, Florida Library. And that's Kelvin Watson, who is uh, the head librarian down there. And I'm just really honored that they thought enough of my work to include it and to help to expose me to a larger audience. Again, these things are happening directly because of my relationships with librarians in particular. So I've had a chance to do some conferences as well. Uh, I recently did the James River Writers Conference. I did 5 sessions for them and their latest conference. That was a great conference. They're based out of Richmond, Virginia. Um, I also had the opportunity to do the Writers Digest Conference in New York City in 2019, as well as the Writers Digest Novel Writing Conference, which was based out of Los Angeles. And I taught there as well. And this weekend, they're doing the Novel Writing Conference and the Writers Digest Annual Conference virtually. And I will be teaching classes online for them as well. I would have never been able to do this if I hadn't made these relationships over time. What happens is you say yes to one event, then you meet somebody that you don't know, you create a relationship, and then that turns into something else. And then that turns into something else. And then that turns into something else. So I'm getting invitations to do a lot of events that I would have never gotten prior to all of this, simply because each event opens up more and more opportunities to do things. I was able to do a book signing there in Charleston, South Carolina. And what was special about that event is that I got a chance to take my wife and daughter with me. A lot of times when you're traveling around, you don't get a chance to take your family, but they were able to come with me down to Charleston. And what was funny is my daughter came up to me with the book, wanted me to sign it. I'm like, baby, I can sign your book whenever. She's like, no, just sign my book. So the day after the book signing, We're walking around downtown Charleston and we go back to the bookstore. We walk through the door and my daughter said, she's 7 years old. She says, "This is Rand Walker. This is my father. He was here last night signing books." And it was just a great thing. My daughter has no idea that her father was an attorney, used to work in magazine publishing. She only knows me as a professor and author. And I feel very fortunate that that is the case. But again, that would not have happened if I had not expanded outside of the Amazon ecosystem. Okay. I know I've told you a lot about my situation, but I really would like to help you if you're interested in finding a way to navigate independent publishing outside of Amazon. So I'm going to open the floor to any questions that you might have.
So if you have any questions, you can type them into chat, or let's try something a little different. If you raise your hand, use the icon to raise your hand, I will invite you to unmute yourself and you can ask Ran your question. So chat or raise your hand to be unmuted. And while we're waiting, I'm going to ask a question. I asked you this when I'm going to stop. I'll put that question on hold. We have a question. Someone is raising their hand. So I will
Okay.
invite him to unmute.
Yes, Ms. Edwards, I see on my screen chat is disabled. I'd like to ask some questions, but I can't use the chat box. Can you enable that?
That's
Oh,
weird. Thank you for letting me know.
sure.
I'm not sure. I'm using somebody else's Zoom account. I'm not sure how we can. Are you okay with just asking your question since I have you unmuted?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Walker, fascinating to hear your story. I'm wondering what the best way is to get into contact with the libraries. You did that through Ingram Sparks. Is that the best way to sort of start making those library contacts?
Okay, so what I did initially was I um, I went through the Indie Author Project, and you can actually Google the Indie Author Project, and they're curating books to help you get into libraries, but you can also contact the libraries directly and just ask them, what is the process for getting my book into this library, and I'm sure they will tell you what the steps would be for that, and you can create individual relationships. I would definitely start locally first. Use your local library. You'd be surprised at how many writers don't have a library card. So, go in, get a library card, meet the people who work there, talk to them, and then tell them that you're an author and see if there's anything that you can do. Now, let me also suggest this as well. If you're going to come to them with a book, don't just say, "I have a book here." What you want to do is say, "I wanted to work with you on some type of community outreach around a project that I've been writing." That way, it's something that can work for them, for the community base that they serve. And it's not just a self serving author thing, but you build those relationships slowly, but, and it will expand because, branches, they're all connected. Um, they're, I often find out that people found out about me because another librarian told them about me. So just, persevere, but, start with your local library and expand outward from there. And I hope that's helpful, Rick.
All right. And we have another question. Let me ask this person to unmute.
Hey, Dr. Walker, it's Reggie. I just had a quick question. What made you decide to want to be an author?
Okay. It was a thing that made me happy, Reggie. Honestly, because I had practiced law. I'd even worked for a small rap label in the South. And, it was back when people were selling stuff out the trunk of the car. And we were doing well. I mean, like six-figure well selling at the trunk of the car. And I just realized I wasn't really happy. And I never told my students this before, but I used to actually be a music producer. And I had a partner in crime. We would do music together. And, I really enjoyed doing that. But I realized that, I wanted to do certain things on my own because I can work at a different pace when I'm doing it myself. But I love telling stories, whether it's through photography, through art, through music. It just so happens that the medium of writing books is the one that works the best for me. So when I found out, well, I wanted to do it. I loved doing it. When I found out that I had an aptitude for doing it, because I got the validation from other places, it only just encouraged me to go farther with it. And I just never looked back. And yeah, so that was 2004 when I first started writing. And I've been teaching college creative writing for 15 years. So hopefully you guys, if you get into a profession that you don't enjoy, keep in mind that you do have the chance to turn things around and go in a different direction. I mean, I'm living proof of that.
All right, and Bree has a question.
All right, Barry, what's up?
Oh, sorry, Barry.
Me? No, it's Bree. It's Gabrielle, Mr.
Okay.
Walker.
Okay, I saw
Um,
Barry Jones' hand raised. My bad.
oh
Bree,
no,
go,
it's
go ahead, Bree.
it's Gabrielle. So my question is not really a question, but more of a concern. So myself, I'm a poet, right? And I've
Okay.
always wanted to put my poetry in a book and get it out there. So what was just like I'm just gonna do it. Like what was that feeling like? It just because I want to do it. So it's like
Mhm.
what had to break for you just to go, I just have to do it.
You know what? All right, so I'm gonna be honest with you, Bree. There's a point in your gut where you know that it's just gonna have to happen this way. Like I've made a decision. When you think about Spike Lee, for example, he says, if I had an iPhone back when I was making films in college, I would have made all kind of films. He would shoot on a Super 8, so he had to buy film and get it developed and stuff. I mean, we have the technology now to make these things happen. And because you can, then you should really consider if you should. Now, before you go and drop your book, though, I do teach a class called Introduction to Poetry, and I can also, teach you how to put that together in a way so that it's very successful. But if you're feeling in your heart that this is what you want to do, then just do it. I mean, back in the day, they used to say that if you self-publish and it didn't go well, you've messed up your career. That is not the case now. You can put a book out there. If it does well, it does well. If it doesn't do well, it's okay. Then you go to the next book and the next book and the next book. But if you're a poet and you have something to say and you want to get it out there, then yeah, you'll know. And when you do, let me know because I plan on purchasing a copy of it.
All right, and Jayla has a question.
Okay, I don't know why I thought Barry had a question.
Hello,
And
can you hear me?
Barry's gonna say, yes, Jayla, go ahead.
Okay, I had a question. What was the thing that
Okay.
made you realize that you no longer wanted to be a lawyer? Because I know it's like a lot of school to go there, and made
Mhm.
you change into being an author.
Okay, that's a really good question. Before I went to law school, I was actually working in magazine publishing. I worked at Forbes and then at Vibe. I don't know if you've ever heard of Vibe magazine, but I worked there. And my intention when I went to law school was to go to law school, learn about intellectual property and corporate law, and then come back and be an executive at a magazine in New York City. I had no interest in practicing law, but the political climate shifted a little bit. Jobs kind of got tight. And my father is a lawyer in Mississippi. And he said, at least get licensed in your home state. So I went and got licensed in Mississippi, never expecting to ever have to use it. And then I couldn't find a job. So I ended up going back to my hometown. My father has since moved away and went to my hometown and found a job as a lawyer there. And, being a lawyer is a lot like being a writer because there's this whole imposter syndrome thing. You go to school for something, but you still feel like you're doing that thing. And you pretend or practice being a lawyer until you actually are a lawyer. But once I got acquainted with the job and I'd been in court several times and represented people in settled cases and dealt with insurance adjusters and dealt with clients who, you know, were sometimes very frustrating, and seeing your clients get these big awards and then spend all the money and the next year they're broke stealing money from accounts that they set up for their children. It just got to be frustrating. And one day I went for a walk around the block just to clear my head. And my eyes just started tearing up because I hated my job that much. And I would when I would stand up, you know how you pop your bones when you stretch? My chest would pop when I would stand up because I had so much stress on me. So I knew I wasn't going to make it. I mean, not doing that. And I started looking for a way out. And when I couldn't find a way out, I just left. So yeah, it's not a beautiful story or anything, but it wasn't for me. Now, what's funny in retrospect, I can look at things objectively like a lawyer, and it's helped me through numerous situations since. But when I was practicing there were mornings I would wake up and wonder if I was going to call in sick. Not because I was sick, but because I just didn't want to be there. And I didn't want to be around that, doing that, dealing with them. And now that I teach, and some of you already know this, my office hours are 8 o'clock in the morning, my student hours. So I enjoy what I do. If I can jump up out of the bed and immediately start doing it, then it means I love what I do. And yeah, that's the choice that I made, and I have not regretted it since.
All right, we're going to move to the chat really quickly. We have some questions there. Cameron asks, if you could go back and change one of your stories, would you?
That's an excellent question. I'm trying to think of who is the philosopher who said the pen having writ moves on. I try not to think about that, but there's some stories that I think I might not have gotten right. Things I could have done better. I'm not going to tell you which one of those books. I don't want to color how you, like if you ever read any of my books, is this one of the ones he wish he could do again? No, I'm not going to tell you which one, but there are some times when I was like, that ending was too neat. It was like a bow on it, very Disney-esque. In fact, a lot of my later works have more open-ended endings because I felt like I put too much of a bow on certain situations. Other times, I think I had a really meaty subject and maybe I just didn't get into it heavily enough. But then, other times I'll pull a book off the shelf that I haven't read in years and start reading it and feel like, oh, this is cool. If I got amnesia and found this book, I probably would finish it. So, yeah, there's some changes. I think everybody who creates enough art will have things that they will second guess. But the key is to kind of keep moving forward.
All right, just looking at chat, which one of your books is your favorite?
Wow, that's a good one. It changes like every 6 months, it's a different book. But right now, and this is my least popular book of all. Like I have a good friend of mine who's a romance writer, and she reads all of my stuff. She's like, oh yeah, I love this. I love this. I said, just read this book. It was a short book, a very short book. I said, just read this book. And she read the book. No, she didn't read the book. She said, I haven't gotten through the book yet. Now the book is the shortest book I've ever written. And she's like, I haven't gotten through it. That means that she can't get through it. So yeah, that's a tricky one. My favorite personally is a book called Work in Progress. And it's the most unique book that I've ever written. I have some microfiction collections that I put out over the last few months. One is called Bees and Things and Flowers, after the Roy Ayers song, My Life in the Sunshine. But I would say Work in Progress, as of today, Work in Progress. It's the least read book, but it's the book that when I read it, I'm like, yeah, I like this dude right here.
What is that book about? Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
All right. So it's about a guy who was in a relationship with a young lady, and there was an ultimatum. She gave him an ultimatum to marry her. He did not marry her. And yeah, he moved into a different and started, and then she got involved with somebody else and got married. And it's not just what the story's about, it's how it's told. There's an Argentinian writer by the name of Cesar Ira, who is one of my favorite writers. He writes using something called, it's leap forward. It's a phrase in English, leap forward. So he would just write basically himself into a wall. And rather than go back and edit, he would just go under the wall, punch through the wall, jump over the wall, just keep going. And the book would just get stranger and stranger the longer it went. So this book was a tribute to Cesar Ira and his writing style. So no character in the book has a name. It moves and shifts in different ways throughout and becomes really meta at certain points of the book and then really crazy in other points of the book. But it's sensual, it's unique. I
All
wish
right,
I
so
had a better way of describing it.
well, I may read that after B-sides.
No, you got to read 30 Love first.
Okay.
Because those characters see where they're going with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just know he better end up with who I want him to end up with. Let me stop. All right. So
Let me know what you think.
all right. So we're going to finally unmute Barry to have him ask his question.
Okay.
Hey, Dr. Walker, you had already touched on it a little bit, but my question was just about imposter syndrome. I mean, you had addressed it under the guise of being an attorney, but can you talk about imposter syndrome as an author, particularly as one that didn't use the traditional model of, Amazon or like a bigger publishing house?
Yeah. Man, one of the things that we do to ourselves, especially as writers, and it's painful, is we compare ourselves to other people. We're like, oh, well, this other person who's younger than me is more successful than me, or they're an Oprah book club pick, or they sold this, the rights to the movie. And you look at that and you start feeling like you're inferior. Like, maybe we're not even doing the same thing. Maybe I don't have the same talent that this person has. You read their work and you start thinking like, no, I'm right there with it, but they just have opportunities I don't. But what we don't realize, and this is the thing I have to kind of remind myself of, just because another person appears to be successful in a particular arena doesn't mean that you should want to switch your life with them, okay? Because they might be going through some things that you just don't know about. Like I remember I used to really envy Colson Whitehead a lot. He's a Black writer who could write in all these different genres. And then, I learned about the struggles he had with divorce and, child custody, this, that, and the other. I'm like, whoa, I don't want any of that. And I have a beautiful, amazing wife. I have a beautiful, amazing daughter. I love my life. And I wouldn't trade that to be in a situation where, I'm selling, 1 million copies of my book. It's enough that I can write what I want to write, how I want to write it, and that there's an audience willing to purchase it, without me having to change who I am to do that. So, yeah, Barry, sometimes it feels like, am I real because I didn't do what they did? And at the end of the day, I guess I have these different things at this point in my life that serve as constant validations of the fact that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So, but if these things hadn't happened, who knows what my thoughts would be. But every day I get up, the fact that I have a job at one of the most prestigious, universities in the country, an HBCU that I always admired when I was growing up, that's a validation. They wouldn't have me here if I didn't bring value. They wouldn't have me here as long as I've been here. So, yeah, sometimes there's that doubt there, but you have to kind of quickly step back and say, you know what? I am a writer. This is what I do. This is how I chose to do it. And then just be okay with that.
All right. So we have a question in chat. My question is, has working at Hampton and having gone to Morehouse for undergrad given you another outlook on the types of books you write?
Can you read that question again?
Sure.
All right.
My question is, has working at Hampton and having gone to Morehouse for undergrad given you another outlook on the types of books you write? And Felipe, maybe you want to raise your hand so I can unmute you and you can ask.
Is this Felipe Gonzalez?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. So, Felipe, I think the question you're asking is, how has the HBCU experience shaped how I approach my writing? Is that what the question is?
Maybe. I think, yeah. I think that's what he's asking because, yeah,
Okay.
hopefully
Well,
he'll respond.
it okay. If you read any of my books, you will see that HBCUs play a prominent role in most of my books. My first book, I actually talk about Morehouse, but I quickly created another college called Ellison Wright College. And I've alluded to Ellison Wright College, and probably out of the 21 books that I have, I mentioned Ellison Wright in about 9 or 10 of them. So I created my own Black college because I want um, my characters to reflect that cultural experience that I had and that my students currently have. So yes, it does factor in. In fact, I encourage you guys to go and read some of these books because, you know, they're really designed for you to read. So, I mean, you would be the primary audience for some of these stories.
And Felipe did say that that was his question. You answered it perfectly. All right. We have
Okay.
a question from Margaret. I'm going to ask her to unmute.
Okay.
Hello, Dr. Walker. Thank you so much for
Hi,
everything.
Margaret.
It was really helpful. I just have a question. Like when you're writing, and like if you're writing a collection or if you're writing a story, how do you know when it's over, or how do you know what to add and what not to add, or when you're hesitating between a part of the story? And then also when you've made that choice and you send it to an editor, and the editor feels a certain way about a certain passage of the book, like how do you how do you stay authentic to what you really want, versus what like your editor might want?
Okay. At the end of the day, you have to make the decision of what you want your book to be. People can make suggestions. They can make educated suggestions. They can make suggestions that would definitely factor in like the business components of certain decisions. But at the end of the day, you have to make the decision as to what you want your book to be. Knowing how to put together a collection or when it's finished, that's a really good question. Like I just completed a collection of 100 word stories. I knew it was finished because there were supposed to be 100 word stories. And I had 100 stories that worked for me. And that was a collection. But with Portable Black Magic, which is a collection of stories, I didn't originally plan for that to be a book. I'd written what I thought was going to be a novel, but it ended up turning into a novella. And then I wrote another thing that was supposed to be a novel that turned into a novella. And then one that I thought would be a novella that turned into a novelette. And then I had these smaller pieces that had been published elsewhere. And I realized there's a common thread that's going between these different pieces. I called it Afro Strange. It's like the Black Twilight Zone. And at that point, when I realized I had enough material that could not function independent of itself, I started considering whether or not I could put them together into one collection. And it took a while to arrive at that. But when I got it, I was like, okay, I have the pieces I want, but what's the sequence that I should use? It's like you're putting together an album. What track comes first? What's the second track? What do you close with? And that took a little bit more effort. So I had to send it out to people who are familiar with my work and ask them about the arrangement of pieces, and then just, take that under consideration and then do my best to formulate what I felt was the best reading experience if a person were to read from cover to cover. So,
All right. So we have a question in chat. Out of curiosity, whatever happened to your first book?
my first book became my fourth published book. The book is called The Keys of My Soul. And that's the one that is the longest of the books. That's the one that almost got acquired by some companies. I'm not going to put the names down since they didn't take it. But if they had taken it, I'd happily have claimed them on it. But they don't have any ownership over that at this point. So why even give them that? But the book is called The Keys of My Soul. It is about a 15-year-old piano prodigy who is homeless, and he winds up becoming friends with this retired R&B singer who's his own son to.
All right. We have another question or comment/question in chat. I find my writing as a lawyer helps my fiction writing and vice versa. Have you experienced anything like that?
Okay, so yes, I have. One of the best things about having a creative writing background and being a lawyer is that you know how to tell stories. And if you're a practicing attorney, you already know that judges and clerks read a lot of stuff that is written by people who do not know how to tell a convincing story. Even juries respond well to well told stories. It's always like, my father used to always say, if the facts working in your working for you, you argue the facts. If the law is working in your favor, you argue the law. But either way, you have to be able to tell a very convincing story. So I think having that understanding of storytelling and how to uh, convey things in an interesting way that moves along is a skill set that works in both places. I think they actually feed each other. And as an attorney writing, I have written things that have had legal components to them, and I found, having that legal background has made it easier for me to kind of talk about certain things in certain ways um, that are more objective when they would have been highly subjective.
All right, and Bree has another question. I'm going to ask her to unmute herself.
Okay.
Hello. Okay. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question is, so you said that you put your university, your HBCU that you made, you put that in every book. So it's safe to say that like your books are one big universe?
That's an excellent question, Bree. They're not all one universe yet. I'm maybe one book away from tying them all together and doing the Marvel thing where everything is
Yeah.
interconnected. Yeah, not quite. There's some overlap though. Like as Renee mentioned earlier, there's a book I wrote called B-Sides and Remixes. That's in the same universe as another book called 30 Love. And she lives in my lap, and Afro Nerd in Love, which is my 50 Shades of Blurred. So if you like erotica, that one is, because I've had some stories published in the same anthology before. So I just went full blown with one book. But yeah, that college keeps popping up. There's a rapper that I have. He's a retired rapper. His name is Mars Banks. He's appeared in about 3 books at this point. And so it's all starting to circle in together. And eventually, if I write one more book where I tie in every single strand, then they'll all be connected, Faulkner style, where it's all in the same community or universe. And I haven't done it yet, but it's a possibility that it will happen.
Do you have one more book left in you? Like you can see yourself writing one more book?
I plan on writing over 100 while I'm alive.
Oh wow. Okay. Go you.
Yeah. I just finished my 22nd book, and my goal is when I'm said and done, my daughter will look at a bookshelf and the whole 2-3 rows of the shelf will all have my books on them.
That's wonderful. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And I just love how your biggest fan is your daughter and the fact that she's so proud of you. I thought that was a very sweet story that you told.
Thank you.
So you're getting some props for the Marvel thing that you're trying to weave with your novels. I don't think we have any more questions, but I did want to go back to the question that I asked you when we both logged on. I told you that I'm reading B-Sides and Remixes. And as I was reading it, this is a romance book, and it's the first romance book that I've ever read written by a man. And it's just so refreshing to see the man's version of romance and what that looks like among fellow African Americans. Do you consider yourself a romance writer?
No, I do not. I consider myself a person who wrote a few romance books or romantic comedies because they try to make you laugh a little bit. I think it'll probably come through more in the 30 Love. But originally, when I was writing, I was trying to write a book that I thought that my wife would enjoy. And plus, I'm a fan of, Love and Basketball, Brown Sugar, Love Jones. I want my own little spin thing 30 Love, and I keep 30 Love. What's interesting about that story is, and you probably heard of people doing this because I got emails after I released the book with people saying they did that very thing. But there were this guy and this girl, they grew up together. They were born on the same day. Their names are almost the same name. His name was Dominique, hers, Dominique. And they grew up together. Their parents were best friends, and he always had a thing for her. But she was like, "Yo, you're my friend. I need you to be my friend because relationships come and go, but friendships stay." And they got to college. They ended up going to college in the same city, and she was getting over a breakup, and he went over to see her. And during the conversation, he said, "You know what? We're both 20 years old. How about this? If we're both still single by the time we turn 30, why don't we just marry each other?" And she was like, "I don't plan on being single when I'm 30." He's like, "I know. That's the beauty of it. If you are, then we do. And if you're not, we don't." And she's like, she reluctantly agrees to it. And like most people who make promises like that, especially when you're in an emotional state at the time, she forgot, but he didn't. And 10 years later, when they celebrate their 30th birthday together, because they had the same birthday, he decides to propose to her. And that's when it gets interesting. I'll say this to get this whole relationship thing, because we always see the B-side, excuse me, the Love Jones, or not Love Jones, but the Love and Basketball and Brown Sugar more from the woman's perspective. You're getting this impromptu engagement from a male perspective, and all of the chaos that comes from that is included in it. And maybe he ends up with her, and maybe he doesn't. What happens when when you finally get something going, there's always somebody else that you were trying to kick it to before who turned you down that all of a sudden shows up. Like you couldn't get a date when you were single, but now that you got somebody, everybody's coming out. So yeah, it's a lot going on there, but it's a fun read. It's a fun read.
I just love romance from the man's perspective. So, yes, what was the name of that book? 30 Love?
30 Love.
And that follows us. I can't remember the book now.
Yeah,
B-side
B-sides
and remixes. Yeah, okay.
And then Afro Nerd and Love picks up right where 30 Love leaves off.
Okay.
And it's yeah. I think
I
you'll
am.
enjoy.
I think I will. I'm really excited. So I'll be finishing up B-side tonight and jumping to 30
Okay.
Love. All right. So
Cool.
in the comments, Bree said that her best friend and I have made that agreement. Cute.
Okay.
And the name of the book that he was describing was 30 Love. And you got someone who said they were going to read that book. So
Cool.
yes.
Great. Great.
Are there any other questions for Rand? Oh, we have one more from Margaret.
Okay.
I'll ask her to unmute.
Yes, one last question. As an indie author, how do you design such amazing covers?
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Um, all right. So because I've been doing this for so long, what I do is I spend basically like half a year focusing on a different aspect of a book. So at first it was all about writing the book. Could I finish the book? And then it became, how do I format the book so that it looks good on the inside? And then it became, how do I design a cover? And then how do I do the wraparound cover and the design and all of that? And I just took a lot of time looking at different covers that I enjoyed, and examining things like negative space, because sometimes you look at a great picture that's symmetrical, and you realize if I shifted this off center and created greater negative space, then I can have a different design playing around. So I just really practiced this over a long period of time. When I first got started, I was taking stock photos and using them directly, but at this point I go and find my photos and I manipulate them in terms of which parts to include. So imagine the whole picture, and then you have a frame, and you put the frame over a portion of the actual picture and work within that space. And it's been a lot of hard work to get to that point, but it's doable. If you want to do it yourself, Canva.com, they have a wonderful software package there that has templates that help you to help design the text portion of your books. Um, but a lot of people outsource things. But if you have an eye for it and you've studied covers and you've looked at enough and you get a gauge for what you like, then I would actually try to do your own cover. I mean, I'm not going to be like, go spend $500 trying to get somebody to design a cover when you're quite capable of doing it yourself. If you have an eye for it, then I would encourage you to try it yourself. But thank you so much, Margaret. I appreciate that compliment.
All right. Well, I think that will be our last question for this evening. Rand, this was a very wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. I hope everyone enjoyed it as well.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Thank you. I hope that we will see you at some of our author panels this week. We are celebrating Indie Author Day. Indie Author Day is November 7th, but we're celebrating all week. I'm adding to our chat a link. If you click on that link, it will take you to a webpage with our upcoming author events that we will have every day from now until November 7th. Rand, any last words?
No, well, I would just say this: keep writing. And if it's serving the purpose of making you happy, then keep doing it. That's what I do.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great night.
Thank y'all for coming out.